What is up, my Lorcana Goons, and welcome back to the Lorcana Goons channel. My name is Kevin, and you're watching the Monday Weekly Meta Watch video where we go over deck lists, meta trends, and what you should be expecting in this weekend's tournaments, maybe even some set champs that you guys might be participating in. I'm joined with Zach Stone here, and we're going to go over the results of DLC Bologna. That's right, our first Disney Lorcana challenge of the fabled format of the second Lorcana tournament season. So if you're a competitive Lorcana player, if you're trying to be your local set champion, or maybe even a DLC winner, you better hit that like, comment, and subscribe button because you got to keep up with all these spicy deck lists. Starting off with this Sapphire Amethyst by Lucas Marcelin. Blurple took it all the way home, Zach Stone. There was only one Blurple in top 8 as well, and this person went undefeated in Swiss and finishing it out the whole tournament in first place. Didn't drop a single match, if I'm not mistaken. That's kind of wild. How are we feeling, Zach Stone, after watching a weekend of hardcore Lorcana action?
Definitely feeling really pumped and really hyped for the next DLC. Do mind my voice. It's a little missing right now, but hey, that's just because I really want to talk about Lorcana. And yeah, Blurple winning DLC Bologna is honestly what a lot of people predicted. I think it had about more than like 1/3 or slightly under 1/3 of the total participation throughout each of the scaling. But when we got to top 8, one single Blurple remained and took out the rest of the competition. And I think there was Amber Steel, Purple Steel, all the deck lists you'll see later in the video, so make sure you're hanging on. And this Blurple list is very unique. I do want to just point out a couple things here. We are seeing the Ursula Voice Stealer again, making her way into those Blurple deck lists. And I think with this one copy of One Jump Ahead, I almost see it being slightly there to, if I need to exert a 2-cost character, I can at least play this one jump for free maybe. And that's not always the case. I know in our testing, when we have used this Ursula card, just turning things that are like costing 1, costing 2 sideways and having no value for the Into the Unknown to be saying really does feel bad. So I guess that helps it just a little bit. But we are also playing one copy of this Magical Maneuvers. It does read that you just return a character of yours to your hand to exert a chosen opposing character. Or I think exert chosen character. I don't know if it's a opposing character or not, but I know that's what the caveat of it is. So it's a little bit more tempo, and who doesn't like bouncing back your characters like Hades and Elsa's to just get those other characters off the board?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of One Jump Ahead in the current meta, even as a one-of in Lorcana, and I'm also a big fan of playing one-ofs in decks like this, dude. We have one copy of Magical Maneuvers, Dig a Little Deeper, Second Star to the Right, One Jump Ahead, and Elsa, the Spirit of Winter. Really cool. I feel like in a deck like Sapphire Amethyst, you have a lot of ways to look through your deck or usually draw cards, right? Finders Keeper, Second Star, Dig a Little Deeper. These are all going to let you find more cards through your deck, so I feel like you can really play around with these ratios, the two TikTok, the two Madam Mim Elephant, kind of like a toolbox strategy. You're hoping to see cards when you need them, and the cards you don't need, you don't want them in your hand when you don't need them. And I really want to emphasize this Ursula Voice Stealer, dude. I feel like breaking that stalemate is so important, and having 2 extra copies, 3 extra copies actually, of an Amethyst card that tells your opponent you got to turn something sideways, I'm going to start swinging into you, is really powerful. Magical Maneuvers is a card that I think is really good. It's a low cost action, so instead of playing maybe a third Ursula Voice Stealer, you're paying something a little more flexible, which is what I like. And then we obviously have the 3 copies of Hypnotic Strength still, because you got to respect the idea of Iago or the opposing illusions, and 4 copies of Iago. I see a lot of people not play this card or kind of take it in and out of their deck, and I just feel like regardless of this card being an illusion character, it's so overstated. I feel like it's a mandatory 4 of to contest the amount of evasives that we have in this meta. But the one jump ahead, dude, even playing it on turn 3, right? Like you ink with Tipo twice, and then turn 3, you're at 3 ink, you ink to 4, you sing 1 jump, you have 5. By turn, by the 4th, 5th turn, you can already start playing your Bell Accomplished Mystics, your Elsa Fit Spirits, potentially even shifting onto your Elsa Spirit of Winter turns early. And I feel like not only against the mirror matches, but against a lot of these like tougher aggro matchups, ramping quicker into some of these cards like Monstro and Elsa might kind of get you in a winning position a lot quicker, which is what I like. So huge shout out to Lucas Marcelin for taking it all the way to first place, our very first DLC champion winner of the format of the season. I can't wait to see how the format develops based off of this, because I like the idea of these one-ofs in the deck, and I'm kind of curious to see how you guys feel about cards like Dig a Little Deeper or One Jump Ahead in a Blurple deck. Is it adding to the consistency, or is it taking away from the consistency? What do you think? And in second place, which we got to see get taken all the way to game 5. If you guys don't know, the finals of these DLC championships, you have to win best 3 out of 5 instead of a normal best 2 out of 3. And Vincent Desiderio with Amethyst Steel taking it all the way to a very crazy, so close, a game 5 with Amethyst Steel featuring 4 copies of Yzma, Genie, Dumbo. We have 3 copies of Doc only. Very interesting. I feel like you're using the Doc and Yzma ability to draw cards from your deck, but maybe having 4 Doc does get a little clunky. I can totally see that, especially because you're still playing Genies in the deck. You know, oftentimes when I've played Amethyst Steel, you get to an awkward hand where you have a Genie and a Doc at the same time, and it does feel awkward, but you have to just sometimes play your Doc without getting any value. But you do play the Giant Cobra. This gives you the ability to discard some unwanted uninkables and gain 2 lore, maybe finishing off the game with a White Rose. But I have been seeing this card talked a lot about this weekend, the Madam Mim Tiny Adversary. A lot of Amethyst Steel players that I follow on Twitter have just been talking about how Madam Mim was a savior for this tournament. Like, it helped them so much throughout the event. Being able to pump your characters, it gives all your characters Challenger +1 while it's all on board. That means your Jafar, your Royal Visor is going to swing for 4, or any other of your evasive characters will swing for extra damage. And sometimes you just kind of want to be able to pick apart the opposing evasive characters, right?
Yes, and I think there's even something to talk about here. Like for any of these one willpower characters, like you play a Mulan or a Happy on turn one, and then you can play a Diablo, right? If they turn that sideways thinking that they're not going to lose that character, and you throw in a Madam Mim in there, trade and draw a card, you actually are on the draw. So your 1-for-1 trades are really good, but your Diablo replaces itself. And that's enough tempo to really take over the game as early as turn 2. So I think that's why we got to put some respect on Madam Mim. That's how quick she can shift the board as early as turn 2. So if you're not playing around a card like her in this meta, I don't think you've done your homework right. And another card, if you're not being played around, is the Giant Cobra. I don't like to allow my Amethyst Steel opponents to get to a high amount of lore because I know they'll win the game with Cobras and White Roses. So they get to 14 and they get to no more after that because I'm not going to allow them to play like 2 Cobras and a White Rose and win the game.
Yeah, I also want to mention Fire the Cannons. We're seeing multiple copies of Fire the Cannons as a staple in like every Steel deck. And I actually made a Twitter poll the other day, Zach Stone, and I asked everybody. I gave like 3 days, and I even tried to do it like right before DLC Bologna so that players would kind of have a little bit more of an understanding of what's going on in the meta. And I asked, is Fire the Cannons a good card? And we had a pretty much overall yes, Fire the Cannons is a good card in the meta. But there was a lot of discussion in the comments. 355 votes total. 82% was yes and 18% was no. And people discussing whether or not it's only good currently right now in this meta or if it's a good card overall. Right now, it does feel like you need some copies of this card in your deck, right? You need to be able to pick off the opposing blue-green strategy. The Amethyst Emerald strategy is very popular, and their main strategy is to be able to shift Clarabelle, Sing Under the Sea, or shift Baymax, Sing Under the Sea. We know how this goes down. So cards like Fire the Cannons can, stop that strategy from ruining your game plan. Or maybe you're playing against Amber Steel. A double Fire the Cannons will stop a Tiana from ruining your day. Maybe even you Fire the Cannons the Aurora before they can play Tiana on turn 2. And even against your Blurple matchups. Fire the Cannons feels like such a lackluster card sometimes, but if your Blurple opponent has a Rafiki on board and you're just trying to get to that end game, like Zach said, trying to get to that 16 lore so you can close it out with a Giant Cobra, double White Rose combo, maybe using Fire the Cannons on those Rafikis, on those Tipos, is going to let you accumulate more lore over time. So I actually do think Fire the Cannons is an important card this meta. It's a card that I actually think is good because there's just not that many cards in Lorcana that can simply deal 2 damage for such a low cost.
Like Fire the Cannons in a deck like this. So let's say you're just playing against Amber Steel aggro. They go like Aurora and Tiana, and you have a Calhoun. So let's say we can go Hypnotic Strength or Calhoun, swing into the Tiana. But before we do that, we put 2 damage on it with Fire the Cannons. Now Calhoun, even when we lose 3 strength, is still doing the 2 with the Challenger 2 and getting rid of the Tiana. So let's just think about it like that as a way to really remove the.
And in top 4, we have some extra spice for everybody. Huge shout out to Bruno Hink with an Emerald Steel deck list, taking it all the way to top 4 of DLC Bologna. I did not expect this. If you would have told me Emerald Steel was going to run rampant at this DLC, I would have called you a dirty, dirty liar. I would have said you're fibbing. 4 copies of Emerald Chromicon. Now, I would have believed that. If you told me there was a deck with 4 Chromicon in top 8, I'd say, oh yeah, of course. Emerald Chromicon is a broken card. 4 copies though. Kind of wild, but I do think you just want to see it. You need to see this card when you're playing this greedy, I like to say, of a strategy. And in order to, ensure that you don't end up with a bunch of Chromicons in your hand and no way to dispose of them, you're playing 4 copies of Mulan and 4 copies of Bobby Zamoruski, the Spray Cheese Kid. Both of these cards on play let you draw and discard a card, which is an underrated ability in Lorcana. And honestly, it's a very hard ability to utilize. I feel like such a noob sometimes when I use Bobby and Mulan because I spend like a minute just looking at my hand thinking like, what do I discard? Like, what is the right card to discard? Assuming you don't have a bunch of uninkables, right? But that's what's really cool about this deck. You can play 4 Chromicon. You can maximize on your 1 to 2 cost characters that can quest for 2 or more, like Cursed Merfolk, or maybe even a card like Fred, which will quest for 1. But when he's challenged, you're gonna end up gaining 2 extra lore. And Fred is kind of broken right now because once again, there's not a lot of removal. So you kind of have to use a Fire the Cannons on a card like Fred, or allow your opponent to just basically accumulate 3 lore from this 1 cost character, almost like a Lady Decisive Dog, right?
Yeah, no, this when you put it on the screen, Kevin, my mouth got a little hot because it is spicy. But I want to talk about some cool points of interaction that I really like. We have ward characters. We have Heathcliff and we have Prince Philip. Now, these are interesting cards because they cannot be chosen except for a challenge. And we are playing Emerald Chromicon. So imagine a situation where you're just putting out a lot of early game threats like the Cursed Merfolks or the Calhoun. So they do get rid of the Merfolk. They are being threatened with Calhoun. And then you drop like a Prince Philip. Chromicon start turning things sideways and they have like no real way of like getting rid of all of your threats. And they're going to have to maybe make some trades and make some difficult decisions. And they can efficiently remove your cards. And just imagine a world where after I get rid of my hand and I play Doc, draw 2. Now, if you decide to trade, I return Doc to my hand and draw 2 more cards. It's going to be a hard deck to combat with. And I do think Chromicon is a card we're going to have to start considering to have answers of in decks going forward.
Yeah, I mean, in case you guys didn't know, there's a lot of item removal characters that you can play currently. Cusco, Benja, the 1 cost Clarabelle, and there's a lot of actions and songs that also remove items. We have Has Set My Heart, which is an emerald action. Sapphire has Hideaway, which is a 2 cost action. And yes, Zach, you pointed out there is a green Fred that also pops items. So right now, nobody's really playing item removal. And I feel like Emerald Chromicon
There's
has.
also a Pete. There's a
Oh
green
yes,
Pete.
yes. There's a 1 cost green Pete. Yes, yes. I think Bruno though. I think Bruno here took advantage of the fact that he knew nobody was going to be playing item removal, and just like you said, being able to take advantage of Chromicon by bouncing your opponent's characters or even bouncing your own characters. That's probably something a lot of players did not respect. They probably didn't think about that. They probably did not realize, oh, if I challenge into his Louis because his Louis just gave me reckless, he's going to be able to bounce back his Doc. That's something that's even almost impossible to play around at some point because if you give your opponent's characters reckless, they're going to have to challenge. So it's a very cool interaction, very cool deck. Huge shout out to Bruno. If you guys want to try Emerald Steel for your tournaments this weekend, I highly recommend playing this type of deck list, especially if people aren't playing these item removal cards yet. All right, Zach Stone. Here we have another Amethyst Steel by Nick Pham. This deck also featuring 2 copies of the Madam M Tiny Adversary. I do think you're going to start seeing more of this in your tournament landscape. A lot of 1 cost characters, Captain Hook, Diablo, Palace Guard. Very important to be able to have these characters. Kind of like you mentioned, Zach, oftentimes people might not respect the ability of your 1 or 0 strength characters to do any damage. So maybe you can even set up some cheeky plays like playing Palace Guard on turn 1 and then using Madam M to use Palace Guard to take out an opposing Tipo, right? Little things like that might add up or even swing the game in your favor. We have 4 White Robes and 4 Giant Cobra in this deck to burst some extra lore. Very nice, very nice. But for sure, what we're noticing is a combination of Doc and Yzma in both of these Amethyst Steel decks that are in top 8. These decks look kind of similar. They're not too far apart. I do want to mention that there's some different decision making in like what we chose to play for characters that have evasive on our turn. This list is playing 3 copies of the Jafar Royal Visor and 2 copies of the Jafar Aspiring Ruler to give our characters Challenger, while the other top 4 list is playing 2 Mistress Me and 1 Jafar, which are cards that do very similar things. Is there a reason why you'd play, a different ratio other than you just like the card, or are we missing something here?
I think there's a little small bits of information that are going to make a difference, and it's the classifications, right? There are cards that actually have counterplay to pirate characters. I think I'm referring to one of the Captain Hooks. And just to remember that these classifications do interact with some of the card pool. And that would be the only difference that I see to want to play anything different. Personally, I think it's just correct to play the Jafar right now because of the pirate interactions. Like you don't want to run into like a Captain Amelia or a Captain Hook in those very, very niche, nuanced scenarios. So I don't think there's any real difference. I don't think anybody is getting punished anytime soon for doing something like that. So
Yeah, the only thing I can think of now that I had like a little bit of time was maybe you if you have Smee in the deck, right? And if you're playing me Zach Stone and I start off with Ink Mr. Smee, play a Captain Hook turn one, right? There's a world where you don't know what deck I'm playing, and there's a world where you think, oh, he inked an ally. Mr. Smee's an ally. So what if he's playing Sapphire Steel allies or something? I guess I could see that as like a small reasoning, but I like the three Jafar more. But either way, very cool. Let's go ahead and move on to the next deck list. Zach Stone. Here we have an Amber Emerald deck list. We have dogs, two dog decks in the top 8 here. Both of them playing Aurora, Tiana, Pluto combo. 4 copies of Tiana, 4 copies of Aurora holding court, which is a princess character that lets you pay 1 less for the next princess you play, and 2 copies of Pluto. This is a very interesting card, the Friendly Pooch, a very similar card to Aurora. We've seen this in other deck lists. Huge shout out to Lorcana Habibi. We talked about it last week. He had this in his deck list, and what this really lets you do, as well as let you play Tiana on turn 2, is you're able to use your Tramp by turn 3. Very, very cool. You set up 3 characters, and on turn 3 you have Pluto available. Your Tramp is normally going to cost 4 because you have 3 characters on board, but now you're going to be able to use your Pluto ability, make him cost 1 less, and you can play this 7 cost character on turn 3, which I think is pretty wild. You're able to dig for any card you need in that scenario under the sea. Improvise to deal with some illusion characters. Maybe you want some bodyguards. Maybe you want to discard your Lilo escape artist for later on in the game. I think if we learned anything from the last couple of weeks of CCQs and big tournaments is that Lilo escape artist is actually a very strong card. Sky won CCQ and then he ended up updating his list for another tournament and won that tournament too and added Lilo into that Amber Steel deck. And I think it makes the Amber Emerald deck a huge threat. Being able to have a character that's constantly reoccurring right now in a deck or a meta where you just can't let your opponent really get to a certain amount of lore, especially comboing it off with Tiana. If you have Tiana set up already and you bring back a Lilo, chances are that Lilo's going to survive, no?
yeah, and because we're not playing like scrumps, we're not able to like reduce the strength of our opponent's characters, and that's what Tiana is there for, right? That means that they're going to have some ink to pay if they're going to challenge the board or have to remove that Tiana, which is very difficult to do. And you are ripping songs out of the hand with Ursula Deceiver. This is the 2 cost 1/3 that looks at the opponent's hand and takes a song out if there is one. And just the hand knowledge alone can allow you to shape up your board, and you can start to figure out what types of removal they have access to, because you're just flooding the board and turning everything sideways in about 1 to 2 turns. And what's really cool about this Lady Miss Park Avenue is that when they do start to challenge the board, remove some threats, you're getting them right back and replaying them onto the board. And she's a 4/4 that quests for 2, so after they take it out, there's 4 damage counters on a character. You can gain that 4 lore back with Gogo Tamago. So the deck is very scary and I think has a lot of tools, and you can build in different ways. We're going to see other Amber Emerald deck lists throughout the rest of the video, and I really think that this deck can go the mile because we have another Amber deck list from the DLC Bologna as well playing Tiana. This is another strategy that we are seeing popularized. Aurora on 1 into Tiana on 2, but it's not just Amber Steel that gets to do it anymore. No, it's any Amber color. You don't even have to play Amber Emerald. You can just play Amber alone and have that as an option.
Yeah, man. Both these players only using 2 Under the Sea in their deck. No copies of Scrump, no Emerald Chromicon, which I'm pretty surprised. I thought I would have seen that in the top 8. This list, however, is playing the Tramp Dapper Rascal. This is a 6 cost Shift 4 character that says during an opponent's turn, whenever one of your characters is banished, you get to draw a card. And sometimes you just need some extra shift targets for your Under the Sea. 4 copies of the Lady Miss Park Avenue in this list. I think the biggest differences between these 2 lists and 2 players' decks is that there's some ratios that are a little mixed up, but I do also want to note that there's a Jim Deere bodyguard in the Alessandro list. I like the combination of being able to go Pluto, the Friendly Pooch, and protecting them with a Jim Deere plus a 1 cost character. Neither of these deck lists are playing Lady Family Dog. That's the 3 cost lady. I'm pretty surprised. I feel like a lot of people were using the 3 cost lady in Amber Emerald, and I know it's really popular in Amber Steel, so So I'm kind of surprised not to see it in these two deck lists. Dog popularity has just been rising, and the Amber Emerald Under the Sea Dog deck actually had the highest conversion rate, and I'll bring that up on the screen too. So out of all the the color combinations that played in the main event, the color combo that had the highest conversion rate in day two was green yellow. And I'm assuming most players were using this dog strategy. So that's very interesting to know. If you guys are playing this deck, you're gonna have to know how to win the mirror match, which is really hard. On stream, you saw a lot of players focusing on their lady Miss Park Avenue because this card does not lose to Under the Sea, and sometimes that mirror match Under the Sea can be extremely detrimental. So if you are going to be playing this deck, you got to know how to win the mirror match because this deck is rising in popularity.
Talking about Amber cards and princesses, we have, of course, Amber Steel coming in the top 8 of DLC Bologna. And it wouldn't be a DLC without Amber Steel still making a splash somewhere, right? And this one's got Lady Family Dog in it, which I think suits it a lot better. If we really look at the 2-cost cards between both decks, we can see a lot more 2-cost cards I would like to play alongside Family Dog Lady than the Sea Dogs deck, because we got Calhouns, we got Nalas, we got Pennies, we got Troubadours, we got Docks. These are cards I want to play for free all the time. And maybe I don't want to play the ladies so much. Maybe I just want to play them for 1 and 2 because I'm just trying to make my big tramp cheaper, right? And if I make that card cheaper, then I can pretty much do whatever I want. But this deck is trying to just get everything out onto the board and not let you do whatever you want, because we're just going to end the game by turning characters sideways. And we have a lot of removal tools like Fire the Cannon, Strength of Raging Fire, and 2 copies of World's Greatest Criminal Mind. I wanted to talk about this card only because I think that this card is just like having infinite copies of Dragonfire against the blue-green deck. They have like Scrooge McDuck, they have Clarabelle, they have Basil, they have Baymax, and I could probably go on. I probably missed a couple, and that's fine because that card is almost always live into that matchup, and it's inkable when it's not. There is only 2 copies, so we aren't dedicating more than 2, and that's probably okay right now. But as we've seen in the top cut of this DLC, World's Greatest Criminal Mind might be going face down into the inkwell. There's nothing really playing like 5 strength characters besides blue-green. So that card probably doesn't see any other play besides that matchup. So you have to really decide how you want to build your decks for these types of tournaments.
I'm a little surprised there's not more of this in top 8, but it just feels like maybe the top 32 cut was very diverse. And if you have a bad matchup, it might not go your way. So I do want to mention 3 copies of Calhoun in this deck list. I haven't seen a lot of Amber Steel lists take advantage of Calhoun. And in a big event like this, it's 12 rounds of Swiss. You're probably going to run into a decent amount of mirror matches or even opposing aggro decks. Aggro decks are kind of guaranteed at a big event like this. There's always some people trying to fly under the radar, like those Emerald Steel decks or those Emerald Amber decks. And Calhoun is really the aggro killer, right? And Zach, you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of good combos you can do in Amethyst Steel with Calhoun plus Fire the Cannons, and Amber Steel lets you do the same thing. So I do like that a lot, and I'm very excited to see Amber Steel still making big waves in the Fabled format. And last but not least, from the DLC top 8 Bologna, because we don't have any other deck lists, we really only have top 8 right now, but we have Jonas, Missouri with an Amethyst Steel deck list. So about 3 Amethyst Steels in top cut. Wow, that's really cool. This is looking like a very consistent choice if you want to play maybe your set champs, or if you're going to DLC Milwaukee. Amethyst Steel looking very nice. This one also playing 1 copy of Madame Mim, the Tiny Adversary, 1 White Rose, but 2 copies of the Lotus Madrigal. Very cool. This is a 4-cost character that quests for 2, 3 body, and lets you draw a card on play if your opponent has an opposing exerted character. And like we just finished saying, there's a bunch of aggro decks running around, so chances are they're going to have an opposing exerted character, right?
Most definitely. Yeah. Questing for 2 is also really good in a deck like this. We also are kind of rounding it off the 5-cost characters, the Bell Accomplished Mystic and the 5th Spirit Elsa, as kind of more of a mid-range Amethyst Steel strategy that still has all the lower to the ground threats that you're used to seeing. So Amethyst Steel just seems like it can be the deck that can just do it all, right? I can end the game fast, I can draw a bunch of cards, or I can just play back and forth with you, still make you feel like you have a chance, but you really don't. A lot of the times when you're staring each other at the face, you need to break those stalemate options. So those are cards that will do that such thing. You still have these threat removing tools like Strength and Fire the Cannons to get rid of these late game threats. So you still have no problem just dropping a bunch of lower guys and having enough characters in play to deal the 5 and 6 strength to remove those Elsas and those Scrooges McDucks. So it again, very strong deck, very popular in this event too. And you said that the Amethyst, I'm sorry, Amber Emerald had like a higher conversion rate. I want to know the conversion rate on this color combo because it really took numbers in the top cut for sure.
Yeah, it's a day two conversion rate. So I'm not top 32 conversion rate, by the way, but still, I mean, day two still a very tough feat to make. I do want to mention 2 copies of Yzma, 2 copies of Madame M. Elephant in this deck list. Madame M. Elephant, man, in Amethyst Steel sounds very good in theory. You can bounce back your dock. Maybe you want to bounce back something like a Giant Cobra so you can gain more lore, or you could use Yzma's ability, exert her, draw 3, play the elephant, bounce her back so she can't be challenged. Maybe set it up for the next 2 turns. Very nice, very nice. Huge shout out to all the top 8 players from the DLC Bologna. Very, very awesome. And congrats to all of you for making top 8 at the first DLC of the format. But that is not all, my Lorcana goons. We're going to go over some more tournaments that happened over the weekend. Here we have the first place deck list from the Game Grid Open CCQ, which was hosted in Utah. Shout out to Jacob Rasmussen for getting first place and earning his invite to the North American Disney Lorcana National. Pretty awesome. If you guys didn't know, the CCQs are third-party events where you can also win an invite to the National Championship, but you need to get first place. So it's a very cutthroat tournament. And a Blurple deck taking first place again. Wow, 2 huge Lorcana tournaments and Blurple taking first place in both of them. We see 1 copy of Elsa, 2 copies of Monstro as your big body characters, 3 Madame M. Elephant, once again, Elephant being somewhat of a staple right now in Blurple, and 2 copies of Second Star to the Right to make sure you're drawing 5 cards.
That's not the only way we're drawing cards here. We're still playing 2 copies of Finders Keepers. This hasn't been so popular as the recent Blurple lists. We've seen less Finder Keepers and more Second Star to the Rights, but we got both of them in this mix here, and it might have paid off. Vision of the Future is just a very solid late game type card. I think that in combination with Binders Keepers may have allowed him to just have more cards to play against these Blurple mirrors, which I heard it was pretty like Blurple dominant at the CCQ as well. Besides Second Star to the Right, we still have the 4 copies of Into the Unknown. That is the only other song we have in this deck list, as well as the 4 copies of Hypnotic Strength and To Develop Your Brain. We are making sure we can find the right cards we need to when we need to.
And in third place of this CCQ tournament, we have our first Baja Blast list of the weekend. Huge shout out to Taylor for making it all the way to top 8. Third place with an Emerald Sapphire Baja Blast list. Now, we've seen this deck before. Your main strategy is being able to ramp into your Clarabelle or even this Donald Duck Perfect Gentleman so that you can keep drawing cards. Eventually, you're going to have way more ink and more cards in your hand than the opponent, so you can use crazy combos like Heads Held High plus Under the Sea, You're Welcome plus Clarabelle, Light on Her Hooves, or maybe even a Bend to My Will, the 7-cost action that makes your opponent discard all the cards in their hand. Very strong deck as well. I'm honestly surprised there was no Emerald Sapphire Baja Blast in the top 8 of the DLC, but I do think that this deck is still extremely powerful, making it all the way to top 4 of this CCQ. And I get the feeling that if you guys are piloting this deck list for your set championships this weekend, you're going to be able to take home some of them Maleficent Dragon Mats.
Yes, this deck did not make a single spot in the top 8 of Bologna. However, I wouldn't write this deck off, not one bit. And you do want to put some respect on this deck's name. You don't want to Bologna's results kind of like undershadow how well this deck can perform, because I promise you, you will have a tough time against it if you are underprepared. And it is only because of the amount of removal and the only deck to have a board wipe in it, right? Because Heads Held High and Under the Sea, that combo is so scary that's why Blurple has to resort to playing cards like Monstro in a deck right now, because it dodges the Under the Sea 3 strength reduction clause. And that's something that this deck doesn't even have an answer to, right? Like, you can't stop an opposing Heads Held High Under the Sea.
And if you guys are playing any off-meta decks for your set championship tournaments this weekend, have no fear. We have a green steel deck list here by LDGS Tempo. This was a second place list from a Fabled set championships with about like 30 players, and we're featuring cards like Max Goof, the Chart Topper, and Max Goof, the Rebellious Teen. Both these cards are going to let you interact with songs in your discard pile. Max Goof will let you grab back maybe a Strength of a Raging Fire, Mother Knows Best, or a Heffalumps and Woozles, and then later on in the game, you can shift Max Goof and quest with him to sing the same song from your discard pile. Very, very cool. I used to think we couldn't sing songs twice in the Emerald Steel deck anymore, but it's looking like you can do it with Max Goof Chart Topper. Love to see it. Some other amazing cards in this deck list: 4 copies of Clarabelle Lightner Hooves, 4 copies of Clarabelle the Contended Wallflower, and 4 copies of the Clarabelle Clumsy Guest. Looking like you really want to get this Shift Clarabelle combo off, or maybe even have some outs for an opposing Emerald Chromicon deck, right?
It is definitely important to have some item removal tools when you have access to those cards in your color combinations. So yes, Clarabelle, the one drop Clumsy Guest, being that item removal when you need to is really good. But just also dropping it on a one drop, it's not that bad. It's only due to the fact that when you are playing Shift Clarabelle decks, they are going to focus your little Clarabelles. So having more copies of those just makes it harder and harder to avoid the shift line. And remember, when you are shifting Clarabelle and you're singing cards like Mother Knows Best, you're returning more cards to their hand for you to be able to draw an equal amount to. And that's how this deck can start to steamroll. And eventually you're just dropping cards like Pete's and Lawrence's. And once you quest and they remove them, then you have Go-Go Tamagos again to finish the job. I really like where Emerald Steel's going. We saw in the Bologna deck list previously that it did not have any of these Max Goof cards or the Shift Clarabelle at all. I think it was just one copy of the 3-drop. And it still can make a showing no matter how you decide to build it. So do not sleep on Emerald Steel either.
Yeah, this one more of a tempo list rather than an aggro list like the Bologna. So I do like that we just have a lot of diversity in how we can even play our color combinations this format. All right, here we have a Ruby Amethyst first place list from a set championships in Texas by Boofy, the homie Boofy. Huge shout out Joseph for making it all the way to first place with Ruby Amethyst, keeping the Ruby Am dream alive. This list looking similar to the list we looked at last week by Kapu from the Texas Lone Star Tournament. We're featuring Second Star to the right with Powerline and Max Goof, some Ruby singers to be able to sing this 10-cost sing together song and draw 5 cards. Very nice. We're also playing Maui Half Shark, which, now that I think about it, is a very strong out to a Heads Held High Under the Sea combo. 3 copies of Shift Mulan, 2 copies of the Goofy Flying Goof. This is a very strong card, especially in combination with Lumiere, the 2-cost character that gives all your characters +1 strength. Suddenly, you have a 6-cost character that can swing for 6 strength and has evasive, almost guaranteed to clear every evasive character in the Blurple matchup, right? And I gotta talk about this Mother Gothel, the 3-cost Ruby Amethyst Dual Ink character. This card is like a steal killer. You know, when your steal opponents start questing, if you have this Mother Gothel developed, all you really need is a 1-cost Mulan or any other damage character really to start being able to ping damage. And the math really does get mathing when you use this card. Oftentimes when I play this deck, I have to explain to my opponents, okay, I'm swinging with my Mulan, it has 2 damage, but when I swing, 1 damage is going to go to your character. And then I'm going to trigger the second Mother Gothel that I have on board, and another damage is going to go to your character. Now, your character is banished, so my Mulan doesn't get banished. And they're just like, what? What just happened? You know, it's a very cool interaction. I do like that we're using this card in this deck because I feel like it is what is keeping the deck alive. And we don't really have many other damage moving cards. Doesn't feel like it's needed. Mother Gothel is the only character outside of Bell Accomplished Mystic that can really move damage around. So love to see it. Huge shout out to you, Joseph.
I can tell you what, Sisu's probably gotten rid of a lot of Tianas, I bet, because that is the one card I probably am very scared of when I have the Tiana in play. If I know my opponent's playing Ruby, I am just crossing my fingers at this point that I do not lose my Tiana to a Sisu. And there's also the Shift Elsa, and that is more for your late game strategy. However, it can also help you sing those additional songs. And again, shifting on turn 6 to have an 8-cost character means any 2-drop can sing your second star to the right, and you have deep frozen a couple of your opponent's characters, so they can't really do much after that. So you can play with all those cards.
Next up, we have a 2-time first placed Amber Sapphire deck list, a set champs 2 times winner by Denny Adamek using princesses in combination with Sapphire cards. We have Patch. This is a 1-cost character that can quest for 2 if you control another puppy character, and we're playing our Thunderbolt. This is a 5-cost inkable that has a puppy shift ability, meaning you can shift this card for 3 ink on any puppy character, and it's a 3/7 bodyguard. So this is a very cool way to be able to protect your 2 lore questers like Penny the Orphan, Lady the Family Dog, or even protect your combination of Tiana Tiana Aurora combo. We're also playing 3 copies of Restoring the Heart. This is a 1-cost dual ink action that says restore up to 3 damage from a chosen character, then you draw a card. This is pretty awesome because you can use this to get rid of opposing Iagos or Cobras or any problematic illusion characters, but you can also use this to heal up maybe your Bodyguard Jim Deere or maybe your Aurora Dream Guardian. Sometimes you got to get some good trades and you want to be able to also protect your characters at the same time.
Yeah, something I actually kind of want to point out, just in my small testing, not with this specific color combo, but while playing against like bodyguard characters, I may not have enough damage with my own characters to safely remove it. Although I'm still putting damage onto that character for a turn. So something like restoring the heart to just remove that damage that they put on like a bodyguard Jim Deere to make them do it all over again could just be game breaking, because a lot of times we don't really realize like removing damage counters actually takes away from how far you're able to actually get tool you're able to remove that character. So it could be a little bit of an issue. We'll see. I haven't played a deck like this, so we might try something out this week.
And I want to go over the Tier 1 Games Fabled Set Championship, Zach Stone, because this was kind of local to our area. So we have a lot of local Lorcana Illumineers making it all the way to the top cut of this tournament. Huge shout out to Edward Romero for getting first place with Under the Sea Dogs. It's featuring 3 copies of Scrump and 3 copies of Under the Sea. So people still are playing Scrump in their green-yellow decks. And Edward actually won the DLC Cinderella tournament that Zach Stone and I got to cast. So we do know Edward personally. That was really cool. Huge shout out to Andre Murillo, another homie of ours, for making it to second place of this tournament with Amber Steel Tiana. As we know, Amber Steel is such a strong deck for your set championship tournaments. I feel like if you want a very safe deck to play, Amber Steel is the one. In my opinion, this is like my go-to deck of like, I don't know what to play this weekend on. I'm just gonna play Amber Steel and turn my card sideways. So I do like that this is a strong deck in the meta still, and this is usually the deck that I use to teach people how to play Lorcana right now, because it does feel like it has some of the most consistent strategies, being able to sing songs, quest with your characters, etc. But huge shout out to all of our homies from these tournaments.
And last but not least, since we're on the topic of mentioning local competitors making top 8 of their set champs, a special shout out to Joaquin for making top 8 at the Magic and Monster set champs, playing Blurple. Nothing too crazy in this list, although I just want to mention that congrats. I know you've been working really hard, and honestly, your improvement in this game is going to get you to the point where you want to be. And I 100% see it in you, so just want to go ahead and give you that little special shout out. Thanks, bro.
Yeah, we had a lot of friends playing this weekend in Bologna, in local tournaments, at the CCQ, so it's always really cool. If you guys did well at your tournaments, please drop your deck lists in our Discord so that we can feature them on the channel. Join our Discord in the links below if you guys want to get involved with the conversation and be some of these top competitors. Huge shout out, by the way, to Omar and 24K Hector, some other friends making it the top 8 this weekend at multiple set champs. We know how much you guys grind for the Lorcana competitive space because it's a hard game to play, man. A lot of people are practicing. People play online a lot. People are playtesting with their friends. People are, have the hidden spice of their decks that they're not sharing. So you guys definitely got to hit those like, comment, and subscribe buttons so you can keep up with all the Lorcana news on the channel. So if you guys have been watching this whole way through, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Zach, what are your overall feelings about the meta now that the first DLC is over? How are you feeling about Milwaukee? I'm going to start. I feel like Amber Emerald, the Under the Sea Dogs deck, is just growing more and more in popularity, and I feel like I need some item removal. Scrump and Emerald Chromicon are very real cards in this meta. Blurple taking first place of the CCQ and the DLC. Is Blurple the best deck still? I feel like it might be if you have some of these dominant players, in top cut, they can take it all the way home with a deck like Blurple. And then Purple Steel feels like a deck that people don't give enough credit to. A lot of people kind of write off Purple Steel as like this very fair deck, but it seems to constantly top events and make its way all the way to the finals of all these huge events, right?
There is a lot that I've been thinking about, but yeah, just to kind of add a little bit more on what you were just saying, it was a very good event for Lorcana and the meta. A lot of people did predict that Blurple would show up the most and be the most represented, and that prediction was right. However, it didn't actually have the amount of numbers represented in Top Cut that translated to how well it was representing the main event. So it won the event, and that's good to know that a deck like Blurple has all the tools it needs to win events. But it doesn't mean that the Amethyst Steel or the Sea Dogs or even Amber Steel decks can't win either. And Blue-Green might be on the downward side. I think a lot of these lower to the ground decks are focusing a lot more on Pete's and Ursula Deceivers, so they cannot get under the seed. And that might be Blue Green's crutch. I know that they are playing the most songs out of all of the other decks right now. And that's something to really think about going into the future of we have this fabled meta game. But I am excited for Milwaukee. I definitely think there is some things to consider going into the deck building phases, and I'm just going to finalize a few different card choices and make sure I get the appropriate amount of testing that I know I need to have the deck ready for this DLC. And you guys might need the same thing too. So go ahead and join our Discord because we are going to be talking about a lot of different discussions, and hopefully we can sharpen each other's brains and get the tools we needed to top these events.
Yeah, iron sharpens iron, as Zach likes to say. So once again, huge shout out to everybody for making top cut at these tournaments. Thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna put the link in the description for all these deck lists below, and I hope that you guys can use them and top some tournaments yourself. So remember to stay tuned to Lorcana Goons for more. My name is Kevin. You've been with Zach Stone. This is the Monday Weekly Meta Watch. We do these videos every Monday. We have Friday Market Watch videos and more videos in between. So be sure to stick around and stay tuned to Lorcana Goons for more.